Hello, welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. I make music as AfroDJMac, and on this show we talk about all things that have to do with making music. Sometimes there's guests, we have conversations, sometimes it's just me talking. And today's episode is what I like to call Reflect and Apply. And this is when I take some information I learned from one of our guests and try to reflect upon it and apply it to our practice. Today we're going to talk about my chat with Ben Burns. That was episode number 10, and it was, as a matter of fact, the first time I ever spoke with another person on the podcast. So we'll get to that in just a minute, but before we do that, I just want to tell you about something I recently released. It's a brand new free Ableton Live pack. It's also available for Logic Pro. It's the 100-year-old piano, and you should be hearing that music behind this now. This is an instrument that I created using my 100-year-old piano. It's a 1913 Chronic and Bach upright piano that I picked up from the local Salvation Army. It's got its quirks. There's mechanical noises. Some of the keys are a little funny and wobbly. It makes sounds that maybe you might consider a little less than desirable. And sometimes the strings are a little bit out of tune. But it still sounds great. It's got tons of character. It's been played a lot. It's very evident by the wear and tear on it. I always kind of wonder who played it before I got it. You know, there must have been at least a few players that had it if it's 100 years old. And I sort of feel like it lives on, like these people live on through the piano and their soul kind of comes out through the sound. And I really wanted to capture that with this new instrument. So I sampled every single key on the piano, built it into Ableton Live Rack. There's also, as I said, a Logic Pro version. On the Ableton Live one, I added some interesting macro controls. I put a filter drive, a soften control, which you can sort of use to mellow out the keys a little. But the thing that I had the most fun with was the reverb, and I allow you to turn the reverb time all the way up to 60 seconds. And when you do that, you start getting these like washed out, almost pad sounds as the sound just reverberates for a whole minute. It creates this dense background thing that you can use in your music. And in this example you're hearing right now, you can sort of hear how these reverb times sort of create this bed for the piano to exist on top of. I think it's a great instrument. It's free. It's free to download at my site, AfroDJMac.com. I hope you like it, and I think it's kind of cool that right now about 1,500 people have downloaded it, and that piano that was played by a handful of different players is now getting played by all of these other players, and that's really exciting to me. So check it out at AfroDJMac.com. It's the 100-year-old piano. And now, on with the show. So it was about, in April of last year, 2017, that I spoke with Ben Burns. And Ben, if you don't know his work, he's a musician, composer, he's a video game soundtrack composer, and he's got his own YouTube channel that you can find at youtube.com/Ben_Burns, and he spells it Burnes. And his output is just incredible. He's relentless. He puts out a number of videos per week, and he's so consistent. I mean, I'm scrolling down through his videos right now, and there's hundreds of them in just about 5 years. It's an incredible productive output, and he's putting out sample packs. He's putting out experiments he does with sound. There's some interviews, conversations he has. And he does a 2-hour track challenge, which I believe he does twice per week, which to me is incredible to even find the 2 hours to live stream and produce a piece of music twice every week. It's really incredible. You should check out his work. One of the things that Ben talked about on the show, and this really struck me, was the idea of scheduling or budgeting your time. So he almost looks at making his music schedule into a financial budget. And in a financial budget, you have a certain amount of money that you're earning, and you have to make sure you're not spending more than you have, right? And knowing how much money you have will help you make decisions about what you can buy. He does this with his time. So he figures out how much time he has to make music every week. say it's 20 hours, and then plans around that. And what I thought was like really incredible about that was it makes you focus on the things that are important. So you can't spend an hour fine-tuning your kick drum if you know you only have 2 or 3 hours in one day to make some music. That's just not economical. That's like buying a Ferrari with your first paycheck. It's just not a good idea. So this idea is to figure out how much time you have every week to make music. Plan it out. Treat it like a financial budget. Very smart way to do it. And what I've done is I've put together a little schedule I call the music production schedule. And I'm going to make that available for you guys to download. It'll be in the show notes. It's just a Google Sheets. It's like an Excel spreadsheet on Google Drive. So you can download it. It's on the web, so you can access it through your phone, your tablet, wherever you get the internet. Which is nice because you can plan out your schedule wherever you are. And the way this works is I've got a column for each day of the week. Under that, there's a row for the available time. So you figure out how much time do you have on Mondays to make music? How much time do you have on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so forth? Your schedule probably varies a bit. So this is something you can do week after week, or maybe if you have a pretty consistent schedule, you can say, okay, after work, I'm going to start doing my music, or before work, or however it works for you. So you set down the available time. For me, like, for example, Monday is kind of a short day. I've got from about, realistically, 4 o'clock to about 6:30 to make music. So I'll write that in, 4 o'clock to 6:30. And I'll do that for each day of the week. Underneath that, there's another row called Task Planned. And this is where you plan out what you want to do each day of the week. Now, I'm not really sure what you are all doing with your music production, but I've got a few different things that I try to do in my musical life. And I'll list a few of them. I've tried to narrow them down as much as I can. I've got the podcast I want to do. I like to put out free packs for people to download, tutorials. I'm making downloads for the AfroDJMac Music Production Club. I want to start doing live streams, which I'll probably talk about in the future. And I want to make music. That's a big one, right? I want to make music. So I got to budget time for that. And the last one that I put down was like business promo work. And this is going to be like sort of anything that has to do with maybe like a website or doing social media or just taking the time to put posts together. So that's another thing. Now, one thing that I kind of figured out by just coming up with my categories is that some things are more important than others. And I had a much longer list than this when I began. And I tried to figure out what was the most valuable things that I do, what I enjoy doing the most, what people seem to respond to the most. And I picked those. And it's helped me say no to other things that maybe I don't want to do quite as much, that aren't as important or fulfilling to me. I recommend doing that, putting down what types of activities you like to do, and it might help you figure out what you're into. And it might be a good way to eliminate things. Maybe you don't like to mix. Maybe you just like recording and writing the songs. So maybe you might decide, I'm not going to be mixing anymore. I'm going to give that off to someone else. You might outsource it. I don't know. But it could be a cool way, it was for me, to kind of narrow down the activities. Because one thing I realized in scheduling my time is there's not much of it. And there's one more column that I put down, and this is called results. And this is kind of like the reality check. So you'll have like the available time, you'll have the task you planned, but then in the results column, write down what you actually did. So it might say that you planned on Mondays. For me, for instance, I planned on working on a tutorial. And then I might look at my results and say, actually, I was on the internet watching YouTube videos instead. And I want to put that there because I want to hold myself accountable. And what I'm hoping that this will do is let me see what I'm actually spending my time doing and try to find some sort of strategy to make it better. Now, one thing that's come up recently, if you've got an iPhone, in I think it's iOS 12, is they put in this screen time feature that tells you how much time you spend on your phone on average every single day. And the first week I got that back, I was kind of surprised. It was more than I thought. It was like 2 hours a day. I set that now to be 1 hour a day. And it's just like hard to imagine that, in a week, say I'd be spending 14 hours on my phone, and that's almost a whole day. That's definitely a whole waking day's worth of work. So I don't want to give that up. So the screen time thing, I think, is a good thing to maybe play around with too with this, to just monitor yourself a little bit. Make sure you're not overdoing it, because those hours and minutes add up and they slip by really fast if you're not paying attention. So you can download this schedule. I think it's going to be cool. I'll let you know how it goes for me in the future, but I'm pretty excited about it. It's nice to have things laid out and planned, and I think it might help you too. Another thing I'm going to do is, in conjunction with this, is set up calendar alerts on your phone or whatever calendar you use. You can set up like a weekly alert. Okay, it's 4 p.m. time to start working on that live pack that you want to make, or it's Wednesday at 7:30. It's time for you to start making some music. To get that reminder every single time, I think, will be important. It'll just show up. It's another outside force. Rather than you relying on yourself to just say, okay, I'm going to make some music now, you got something kind of nudging you a little bit. And it's my prediction that if you put that off a few days in a row, you're going to feel guilty, and that guilt might be enough to motivate you to start making some music. Now, in speaking about narrowing down the activities that I want to do with my precious few music hours every week, I've tried to figure out ways to combine activities. So how can I make my music production time as productive as possible? So one thing that I'm going to start working on more and more, and I think my 100-year-old piano is a good example of this. When you watch the video, I make some music. It's not me explaining the piano. It's not going through the features. I'm just making the music. And one of my bottlenecks is video production. And if I'm going to spend the time doing the video production, maybe I can also produce a little bit of music too. So while demoing the pack, I'm also making music. So I'm sort of scratching two itches at once. So it might be something to think about. Are there ways you can double up? One thing we need to do a lot when we're making music is to stay organized and get a good workflow going, have a good space to work in. So there might be some ways while you're actually making music to work in some of that stuff too. For instance, if you are, say, tweaking an effect and you like the way it sounds on a certain track, save the preset. It's so easy to do. Just in Ableton Live, click the little floppy disk logo on the top right of the device, and it goes in your library. Label it something you'll remember. This is a cool snare drum reverb. Nice. Throw it in your library. Next time you have a snare and you want a certain reverb, or you want to maybe even emulate the reverb that you came up with on this track, you can call up that preset and it's there for you. Also, save some templates, save some defaults. There's easy ways to save default tracks, default presets. You can have a default set in Live that opens up every time. You can have templates as well. So doing that will eliminate some of those repetitive tasks and make your time more efficient. When it's time to do your music, I've got the task planned column on this music production schedule. So when you're showing up, have a plan. Know what you're going to work on before you start working. I think it might be a good idea to keep a notebook and maybe even write in that the day before about what you want to do, or just use this spreadsheet I created. Just make a list. You can copy this spreadsheet and duplicate it every week. Maybe Sunday nights is when you plan out your week. And you can have this all scheduled for you so that when you do have the precious limited time to make your music, you know what you're going to do. You can just go right to your plan. You won't spend a lot of time, figuring out what you want to do. The next thing I think we need to do is remove distractions. Distractions are everywhere, especially on your computer. You've got the whole internet. You've got probably a TV. You've got TV shows in your computer. It's Netflix. It's everything. It's everywhere. You got to avoid that and make this time just music. So I think something you can do is use that stuff as a reward. If you're really excited to watch a YouTube video, how about put it off until you're done making your music and let that be something you're working for, if that's what it takes to motivate you. Motivation is precious and hard to come by, so every little thing counts. Right now, to tell you the truth, I set aside a YouTube video that I want to watch that I'm not watching until I'm done with this podcast. And it's motivated me to not procrastinate a little bit and get going. Because we all know how that YouTube watching can lead to another video, related videos. YouTube has figured out a lot of clever ways to keep us engaged and keep watching and take our attention away. So we got to fight that actively. So I would say put that stuff off till the end. And when you're working on your music, don't go into YouTube to figure things out. Move on. Try something new. Make a note of it. Okay, I need to figure out how to do this one task. Make a note. You'll research that later. And then just move on. What I guess I'm really getting at this point is focus. We have to focus our work. We have to pay complete attention to what we're doing. I personally think you are much better off having an hour of focused, uninterrupted time than 4 hours of time where you allow interruptions in. In that hour, you can get a lot done. When we have limited time, it becomes more valuable to us. For me, as a high school teacher, when I have summer vacation, I kind of feel like I have all the time in the world. And because I feel that way, I put things off. And music production is one of those. I say, I could do it later. I got all day long. I'll just sit around for now, lay in bed a little longer. You decide to just do lazier things because you feel like the time is always going to be there. But what usually happens is things come up. So now I stayed in bed too long. I watched too many episodes on Netflix. And now I have to go do something because something came up and I just lost my time to make music. Personally, I think the morning is a really good time to do things because you can make sure it gets done and then go on with your day. You'll get a nice sense of satisfaction, and then you can use the day to reflect on what you've done a little bit. Maybe in your car ride, you can listen to your mix. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but now you've got it done. I can get very down on myself if I don't do anything productive with my musical work in a day. So by doing it early in the day, I make sure that this important thing in my life gets done first. Now, there are many days where I can't do it first thing in the morning because I have other obligations. So make it the first thing you do when you get home. Don't put it off for late at night when you're tired. I know a lot of people like to work late at night. There's a sort of different energy you have, but from my experience, that doesn't always present itself as a viable opportunity. Sometimes things come up, as I said, or you're just worn out and you're really not putting your best efforts and your best self towards the assignment that you're working on. So I think it's good to get it done the first chance you get because you might not get another chance later on. As you may know by listening to this podcast, I like to try to make connections between how things work with, say, music and other aspects of my life because I think often there's a connection, and if you find something that works in one realm, it tends to work in another realm. So this idea of like focused bursts of work rather than long periods of time to do your work where you allow yourself to be distracted reminds me a bit of the kind of working out exercise technique called high intensity interval training. And what that means is you're basically working out at extremely high intensities. You're really pushing yourself hard in short intervals, and you wind up working out much shorter. So you could go to the gym for an hour, stand around, take 5-minute breaks between sets, and barely break a sweat, and you've spent an hour at the gym. Or you can do something like in high intensity interval training and spend 1 minute doing push-ups, take 10 seconds of a rest, move on to your legs, and just keep switching up your workout real fast without much rest and totally focused. And by doing that, you'd be surprised at what you can do to yourself in just a few minutes. You can get a really, really quality workout in a very short amount of time. That's usually a lot better than someone standing around the gym, half watching TV, half doing a few bench presses every once in a while. The idea is to push yourself hard and to stay focused during these rounds. And actually, a tool I like to use with my music production is a high-intensity interval training tool. It's an app called Seconds Pro. I'll put a link in the show notes. And what it is a timer, essentially. It's used maybe for like, say you're a boxer, you might set it for a 3-minute round with a 1-minute rest, and then it repeats. So every 3 minutes, you're sparring for that amount of time, and then you get the 1-minute rest in between rounds. And you set it up for your workout however you want. It could be 30 seconds and 10 seconds rest or whatever. I like to set it up for certain tasks that I'm doing. So I might give myself 10 minutes to come up with a beat. I might have another 10 minutes to say, come up with a bass line. And however you decide you want to do it. Maybe you decide I only have 20 hours for making music, so I can't spend all this time on a track. If I want to say produce a track every week, I need to limit the amount of time I'm spending on each activity. Get something as good as I can during that time and then move on. It's called Seconds Pro. There's a couple different things you can use. There's other versions of the same kind of thing, but I like this one a lot. It's very easy to set up, and you can put as many different types of timers as you want. It's kind of funny. I have like sound design timer, and it gives me like 15 minutes maybe to come up with a sound, and then I got to move on and use it. And it's a nice way to keep yourself disciplined and not lose track of time, because we all know it's very easy to lose track of time when you're making music. And that's why we should schedule it and budget it, as Ben Burns said. Treat it like money, because it's actually worth a lot more than money, because you can always get money back, but you cannot get the time back. So we got to treat it a little better than maybe we have in the past. So if you like it, check out the link I have in the show notes where you can download my music production schedule. It's really simple, and you can make one yourself if you want. But it's just got the days of the week. You put in how much time you have each week, plan a task, and then keep track of the results. I think that's important. I think it's a good idea to just pay attention to how you're spending your time, because we all have the same amount of time in a day. And somewhere I heard this, that all the greats in history, Leonardo da Vinci, Einstein, whoever, they all had the same 24-hour day that we do. They didn't have extra time. They had no other advantage. So it's not a matter of time. There is time. You just have to make it and keep track of it and guard it and use it wisely. And I think by looking at your results, you'll give yourself an honest perspective on how you're really spending your time. Are you wasting it? My bet is probably. I know I am. And that's why I'm going to try to follow this schedule myself. Thank you very much for listening. And please go back to episode 10 and listen to what Ben Burns has to say. He has a lot more wisdom than just his scheduling of his time. He's done so much cool stuff and continues to do cool stuff. He recently put out a nice sample pack with glass that he broke. He's got a new one called the Fruit and Vegetable Sample Pack, which looks pretty cool. I think his work is great, and it's very inspiring, and it's proof that if you have discipline, you can do quite a lot, and he's got plenty of discipline. And also check out the 100-year-old piano on my site, AfroDJMac.com. It's the 175th free Ableton Live pack that I've made over the last, about 8 years almost. It's also a Logic Pro pack. It's one of the first I've ever done for that. So if you're a Logic user, you're not left out anymore. Thanks a lot for listening to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. I hope you enjoy that schedule. I hope this helps you make some more music. And right now, as I said, for finishing the podcast, I'm going to go reward myself by watching that YouTube video I mentioned before. So you guys have fun and happy music making. Take care.